Today, I'm going to be sharing with you guys 7 reasons as to why I shoot Fujifilm, with maybe like a bonus or 2 in regards to the topic. But to clarify, this is not a knock on any other camera brand or anything like that. I just like Fujifilm and that's why I shoot it for the most part, so long story short. But you can also call me a Fuji fanboy or whatever, I'll take it, because at the end of the day, I do like Fujifilm as a company and I like their cameras a lot. So I shoot it, so what can I say? So let's go ahead and get into it. The very first reason as to why I shoot Fujifilm is for their design. I think their cameras are designed really well, and it might seem kind of silly to choose a camera based on its design, but I generally, as a person, I have a peculiarity for aesthetics, and I think this is something that can be shared amongst a lot of photographers in general. So I really like the design of the Fujifilm cameras because things like the X-T4, the X100V look almost like retro kind of style film cameras, and sure, there are other companies that do it as well, but I think Fujifilm is a really nicely designed camera company. So especially with Fujifilm cameras, I've noticed that a lot of people kind of like the aesthetic, so they would compliment it, or even if they don't have any idea about photography or cameras or anything like that, they would say, oh, that's a cool camera. And so the X100V is probably one of the cameras I get complimented on the most, and I just really like the design and style of the camera, and that makes me want to use it more. Similarly, the size is pretty small compared to like larger DSLRs and stuff like that. I think the fact that they managed to compress the size of such a high quality camera into such a small package and keep it at a reasonable weight allows me to carry it more easily and be more compelled to use it. Does that make sense? So alright, second point or second reason as to why I shoot Fujifilm is the handling, and this kind of goes in with the design a little bit because the design kind of takes into account the ergonomics, but I really like the ergonomics of Fujifilm. I've shot with Sony before, and my parents have kind of a Canon camera in the back that I've tried using before as well, but it's never been the most intuitive, and I never really liked or enjoyed using them for the most part. Fujifilm kind of emulates this whole kind of retro style design with manual dials and manual controls, and I get that this is kind of a preferential thing because some people like having a more simplified kind of back and stuff like that, and they don't like the manual dials. But me, I personally really like it. For example, having on your lens to have like an aperture kind of setting, and then on the body to have a shutter speed and ISO dial that actually gives you feedback, so you can just look at the top and then you know which setting you're on without having to look at the screen. It's something that I really enjoy and I really like about Fujifilm. So it kind of fits in and works, and it makes sense for me, at least, for when I'm taking photos, changing settings and things like that. It's just so much more intuitive than if I had a different camera that doesn't have the manual dials, but they just had these custom settings and stuff like that, and the custom kind of, like the rear and front dials that Fujifilm has. A lot of camera companies have that as well, but then I have to look at the screen every time I'm switching a setting to make sure I'm on the right setting, so it can be a little bit confusing. I like the physicality of Fujifilm. I think it makes the whole shooting experience more fun and it's more comfortable. And now keep in mind, I never shot film before I shot Fujifilm, so it's not like I'm someone who came from film who is used to manual dials and stuff like that. I shot Fujifilm before I shot like film, and I just felt like it was just much more intuitive to shoot even digital this way. It avoids the whole kind of process of having to go into the menus to set up settings and functions and stuff like that, and I just think it's so much more intuitive and so much more easy to use the camera this way. The next reason why I shoot Fujifilm is because of build quality, and again, this can kind of be implemented into design as well, but I would feel like they're kind of different. For example, you can have a really well-designed camera, but the build quality could be really bad, or vice versa. So I think Fujifilm does a good job at both of these things. The design is nice and the build quality is really solid as well. So it doesn't feel like I'm holding like a cheap kind of toy or anything like this, but I'm holding an actual camera that I know isn't going to break on me, and it isn't going to, malfunction in certain climates or conditions or anything like that. I think the build quality of Fujifilm is very solid, especially for the price point, because generally you can go a higher price point and then the build quality goes up as well. But Fujifilm does a good job at keeping things relatively affordable while also keeping the build quality really nice. So that's something I really like as well. The next thing is a little bit more of a practicality thing, and that's because the Fujifilm cameras are very capable. Like, as much as design and aesthetic and all that stuff is important to me, if it didn't work as a camera, I would not be using Fujifilm. But Fujifilm has done a good job at keeping up to date, not only in photographic specs and stuff like that, but for video as well. So the camera works. That's what I mean to say. It functions and it does everything it's supposed to do. And I haven't really been held back with Fujifilm cameras as I have been with other camera brands or camera companies. And I think that kind of ties into how I personally particularly like to shoot as well. Kind of your style or preference or mode of operation kind of changes. So I understand why people would like Sony or Canon cameras, but Fujifilm kind of melds in with how I like to shoot. So it works. It's really easy to use. It's very intuitive to use. I'm rarely in the menus, to be honest. I've kind of figured out what settings I like and I really have to go into the menus. Yeah, it's super easy to use and it gets me the stuff I want it to get me. Next up would be film simulations, and I understand that this might be a little bit of a mixed bag because a lot of people really like film simulations, but I've also heard several accounts of people who don't like film simulations because it kind of holds them back from finding either their own personal style or just feels a little bit too much like a preset or a filter, you know what I mean? But Fujifilm, essentially, if you're unaware, they have a lot of camera profiles or color profiles that they deem as film simulations. So they're supposed to emulate kind of an older aesthetic or a more retro kind of aesthetic that is more reminiscent of film back in the day, and I think they're really good. And now I personally like film simulations because I like to have a variety of good looking profiles that I can choose from and then edit as a base from there, and then it gets me kind of the aesthetic and style that I want. So that's the reason why I like shooting Fujifilm, is that sometimes it's just fun, you know what I mean? You don't have to worry so much about colors or exposures or things like that. You can just go out and take pictures and have an enjoyable experience because you know it's gonna look good, or you know it's gonna look exactly how you want it to. You can get the flexibility of a variety of profiles in different film simulations, such as classic chrome, classic negative, or acros, or you can just shoot raw and then just kind of work from there and then maybe add the film simulation in later if you want more flexibility like that. I personally like having the options of film simulations because, like I said, it keeps things fun. It allows you to try different things. And sometimes it kind of takes the stress off of photography. You don't need to be so serious about getting things clinically perfect. You can just go for kind of an aesthetic you want, you know what I mean? So that's a big reason as to what I like about these as well. The next thing I want to talk about is actually for video, because I came into Fujifilm with the intention to shoot a lot of video, and I might not have shot Fujifilm if they didn't have the profile Eterna. So Eterna is kind of a film simulation that you can use for video that allows you to get kind of an in-between of F-Log and just like a normal camera profile. But I think it's a really solid way of shooting video because it gives you a higher dynamic range than normal video, but it doesn't quite mute all the colors like F-Log does. So you have room and flexibility for color grading for video, but you don't necessarily have to if you don't want to, because it looks good straight out of the camera. So Eterna is one of my favorite modes. I use it for pretty much every video, and I like the flexibility it offers, but I also like the way it looks already. So if you're interested in video and you don't want to do too much along the lines of color grading, you don't need that much flexibility, but you want a little bit to like color correct or exposure correct or something like that, then I think Eterna is probably one of the best things out there, especially for skin tones. I noticed the way it makes skin look is just really nice and really overall pleasing towards the eye. So that's a pretty big factor as to why I shoot Fujifilm. Reason number 7, and this one might be a little bit controversial because it's my preference, of course. Again, I'm not knocking on any other camera brand or anything like that, but Fujifilm as a company as a whole seems to really listen and care about its consumer base. So before I shot Fujifilm, I was considering buying Sony or Canon cameras, but I noticed a peculiarity, and of course correct me if I'm wrong because I don't keep up too much with Sony and Canon stuff anymore, but I've noticed the thing about Sony cameras is that it feels like they're almost always making the same camera. So they would do a re-release of a new camera, but it's kind of like the old camera before with a few new added features that may or may not benefit the whole system as a whole. That's what it appears like to me. And for Canon, the reason why I didn't shoot Canon is that it feels like they kind of hold back on features. So I was interested in getting certain cameras that would allow me to have a mic input, have good video, have good photography, etc., etc. But it always felt like I wanted everything, but they would hold back on certain aspects of what would make a camera good. And then they would release it later in a different camera at a much higher price point, so that would kind of irk me a little bit. It felt like they were holding back on their consumer base. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like Fujifilm likes to listen to their consumer base, and they like to give you what you want and try and make it work as well as possible at a relatively affordable price range, you know what I mean? And that's what I like so much about Fujifilm, is that even though, yes, it's not full frame, you're not getting as much information and stuff or megapixels or things like that, it's very affordable and it works really well. So that's more than I could ask for, to be honest. Reason number 8, this one's kind of a bonus, is that I shoot Fujifilm because of, in part, the community. So it seems kind of weird that you might shoot with a camera brand because of the people who are involved in that community, but that is a pretty big part of it, because the Fujifilm community has been one of the more supportive and friendly and nice communities that I've seen as far as like photographers go and stuff like that. And it might seem a little bit biased, but it's just anecdotally what I've noticed. And now the community isn't perfect, of course, there is a jerk here or there all the time, but for the most part I've noticed that most Fujifilm shooters are pretty nice and generally very supportive of each other. I think that having a community that is nice, helpful, and supportive of each other is just nice. So anyways, those are the reasons as to why I shoot Fujifilm. Let me know down in the comments below why you shoot Fujifilm or why you like Fujifilm cameras and things like that. And if you guys like this video, please go ahead and like the video, subscribe to this channel down below for more stuff, and I will see you guys in another video. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.